The Film Learnin 60K short film competition with over $1,000 in prizes is now on. Head to filmlearnin.com to download your entry pack and to enter your short film. Hey guys, welcome back to the 4th episode of YouTube Masterclass. On this episode, I'll be taking you behind the scenes on my channel and showing you the process of putting a Film Learnin episode together. So my first step is almost always the same, heading to the comment section in Creator Studio to find a request I'd like to produce. Now I say almost because a lot of the time I'll take note of requests say weeks in advance and I'll screenshot it knowing that I'll plan on doing that episode later on. For the most part, I like to plan these tutorial videos in advance, but it doesn't always work that way. Now that I have my request or requests grabbed, I've decided on the next episode and it's time to research it. I'll head onto the interwebs and I'll grab as many high resolution clips of that effect as I can. For example, for Cisco's Vibe effect, I managed to find every single instance that he used it on the show. From there, I'll throw on my thinking cap, open up After Effects or Cinema 4D, and I'll start experimenting from scratch. Now if I believe there's a method they've used, I'll try to find a behind the scenes video or just try and find a tutorial that showcases an effect that I can modify or utilize for my own purpose. Yes, I still watch tutorials. Without watching tutorials, I wouldn't have been able to figure out the whole breach effect itself. So yeah, sometimes I genuinely have to learn how to do something before I can teach you. Because in many cases, I'm attempting to do something that I've never done before. So when I've got something that I'm actually happy with, my next step is to ask you guys what you think of it. I usually post say a work in progress picture or a movie file on my Twitter or my Facebook page, and I'll ask for your feedback. This is a big help, and especially with say the Cisco Vibe effect, as the constructive feedback on my first attempt allowed me to go back to the drawing board and make that blast a hell of a lot more accurate. So what's next? Well, in most cases I'll shoot the sketch or the scene that accompanies the episode to ground the effect in a context. I usually come up with these sketches on the fly. In fact, I don't think I've scripted a sketch for Film Learnin in years. I'll think of say 3 to 5 beats in the scene, think of how I'll edit it together with a rough idea of what I'll say and how I'll block it out. And then it's just a matter of setting up the shots and recording myself and Doug's dialogue, which I always improvise. Now this isn't really the best way to shoot a scene, just so you know, I'm just winging it every single time, but I've kind of got used to it now, so I can do it fast. Usually the longest part of this process is lighting the shots individually, as I always try to do my best to make sure that the shot isn't flat looking and is actually interesting. From there, I'll import that footage onto my computer, open up Premiere, and then I'll cut together the short roughly. If I have any green screen footage, all I'll do is just do a quick garbage mat around it or lower the opacity and plop it straight on that background. Once I have my scene all cut together, I'll watch it over a few times and make sure that it flows right. It's at this point that I'll go in and I'll refine the edit by trimming a few frames here and a few frames there, just making minor cuts to help with pacing or punching things up for comedic effect. This is also the point where I decide what should be a close-up or a medium shot, as my 4K footage allows me to switch between the two in a full HD sequence in Premiere Pro. From this point, I'll select out the shots that will feature effects and send them through to After Effects using Dynamic Link. In most cases, I've already got the effect ready to go, and it's merely a matter of compositing it onto the footage and getting the timing right. Sometimes at this stage, I may find that the effect doesn't quite work for the shot that I've actually shot, or something goes wrong for instance, so I'll figure out by experimenting what I need to do to fix it and then finish all the shots for the scene, render them out, and then head back to Premiere Pro and import them. I'll then replace the footage I've sent to After Effects with my rendered files, as it speeds up playback. Dynamic Link files play back fine if the effects on them are, say, minimal, but when there's a lot of layers going on, even on my PC, they still chug. But now that my scene's visually complete, it's time to add some sound effects. I'll usually jump into my sound effects archive and find what I need by combining several sounds, but when I come up short, I'll generally head over to YouTube or to Google to find the exact sound I'm looking for. Once my sound effects are in place, it's time to add some music. I'll open up the Film Strobe panel in Premiere Pro, select an appropriate song for the scene, and then it's time to customize it using the sliders and then render it and drop it into the timeline. I've said it before and I'll say it again, this software is amazing and it's free. Now that my scene's all put together, I'll render it out. But that's just the sketch. I still have to make the rest of the tutorial, right? Indeed. So it's back into After Effects, and what I essentially do here is reverse engineer all the steps I took to make the effect, working backwards until I'm left with just a blank comp. I'll then put all those details step by step in a script that I write in sort of a mind space format that sounds like I'm naturally speaking, which is why it has jokes and a lot of my personality just spiced in throughout it. It also makes it feel less boring and mundane, which I find is one of the biggest issues with tutorials these days. Since these scripts are step by step and cover everything, they're usually quite detail oriented and technical, so it makes them relatable and it also helps with memory retention by the viewer. So I've now got my script. Now it's time to head into Audition and record the narration. This is generally a pretty easy process thanks to me writing the script in the cadence I naturally speak. I very rarely flub lines during these recordings, and for the most part, the only editing I need to do on these is just some noise reduction and editing out any pauses when I go from one page to the next. Now once my narration is recorded, I'll jump back into Premiere Pro, add my narration to the timeline, set up After Effects to start the tutorial, and then I'll start up Adobe Captivate and record the screen. I'll then start the narration play in Premiere and actually follow my own narration step by step to test whether I'm able to easily follow along my tutorial. It's during this process that I may find something doesn't work or it needs tweaking, so I'll stop the capture, possibly re-record some of the narration, start the capture back up, and then I'll keep going until I reach the end of the narration and all of the tutorial is captured. From there, I'll head back to Premiere Pro, import my screen captured videos and sync them up with the tutorial narration. Now sometimes this does mean speeding up my movements or cutting frames as I preview an animation. Either way, when it's done, everything syncs up with my narration. Now guys, the last step of a Film Learnin episode is always the same. I shoot this part right here, the on-camera intro and the end. It's without a doubt the easiest and quickest part of the process. I've done this so many times that I could do it in my sleep. Set up the camera, put on the lights, hit record, say the intro, tell you what you need to know, and say the outro. I used to script these things, but honestly I stopped doing it last year as it just adds more work for no real reason, and this usually takes me less than 10 minutes to film these. Once that's done, I'll head to Premiere Pro one last time, import that footage into Premiere Pro, edit out any flubs or pauses so that we have a nice clean intro, and maybe throw in a "my God." Skip to the end of the tutorial, add in the summary, add in the outro, and we've just finished a Film Learnin episode. I'll render that out in a H.264 format in a variable bitrate on 2 pass with a minimum bitrate of 15.5 and a maximum of 19. And that's it gang, my entire workflow for creating an episode of Film Learnin. I hope this gave you a bit of insight on just how much work goes into creating a tutorial, and I just scratched the surface. So guys, that's going to do it for our 4th episode of YouTube Masterclass. Come back tomorrow and we're going to address the elephant in the YouTube room, the exceptions to the rule. And we're also going to address some comments made on my last videos regarding views and growth. Why? Because that's worth talking about. That said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please smash that like button. If you are new here, why not hit subscribe and turn those notifications on, and check out the rest of our YouTube Masterclass series right here. We've also got our 60k short film comp right here as well, and join me on my social media right up here. But until the last episode pops up, keep learning.